So the year is 1977, and a collaboration of climate scientists from Columbia University, MIT, and Exxon, yes, Exxon, have internally published one of the most comprehensive climate models of their time. What these scientists found is that with the rate society was pumping CO2 into the atmosphere, there would be potentially catastrophic impacts on the climate, with dramatic environmental effects before the year 2050. So did they take this information, run it on the front page, and start telling the White House to cut back on fossil fuel consumption? No, quite the opposite. Just like when the tobacco industry started to realize that smoking caused cancer, this was the beginning of Exxon's multi-decadal marathon of climate science denial and obfuscation. But how accurate were these old models from the 1970s? And if #ExxonKnew really is true, what should we be doing about it today? Like any international company focused on turning a profit, risk assessment was a large part of Exxon's budget. Rumors about the potentially dangerous effects of carbon emissions had reached the ears of Exxon executives, beginning a period of climate research funded by the very people causing the problem. Over the next several years, multiple internal publications all found the same thing. The carbon dioxide coming from coal, oil, and gas combustion was already warming the planet and would do so for as long as it continued. This research stayed under the public radar for decades, showing that Exxon was actively concerned with how their business would harm the planet moving forward. But what was said behind closed doors couldn't be more different from what was said to the media. While nearly all internal research at Exxon pointed to the reality that CO2 was warming the planet, there was no way they could let this knowledge outside their walls. So like any big corporation trying to make their product appear safer than it really is, they began subtly sowing seeds of doubt into the minds of the public through advertorials and press conferences. A 1993 advertorial in the New York Times titled "Apocalypse No" broadly labeled IPCC reports as pseudoscientific arguments based on non-relevant data, and stated things like the net impact of a modest warming may well be beneficial. Another New York Times advertorial from 2000 titled "Do No Harm" calls the global climate just as changeable as your local weather forecast. And during this time, ExxonMobil CEO Lee Raymond stated in speeches they do not believe that the science required to establish this linkage between fossil fuels and warming has been demonstrated, and that if we cannot forecast the weather a week from now, I would be suspect of our ability to forecast the climate 100 years from today. But despite saying this, it turns out Exxon was pretty damn close to forecasting the climate. At the beginning of 2023, a paper was published in the journal Science comparing Exxon's old climate models to what had been observed since they were made. This is the first model that was internally published in 1978, showing the estimated global temperature if fossil fuel consumption were to continue through 2050. But how close was this to what actually happened? Here's the temperature up until 2020. Now, admittedly, this first one may have overestimated things a bit, but the real temperature is still within the error bars. Also, here they predicted polar warming at just over 3 times as fast as the global average warming. As it turns out, the Arctic may be warming at as much as 4 times the global average, making this Exxon prediction pretty accurate 45 years later. But this was just the first of many models. This one from 1982 shows 2 lines side by side. This one on the left represents the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and this one on the right is the global temperature. Now let's see how they compare to what has actually happened. As you can see, it's pretty spot on. Not bad for 80s climate science. And this pattern continues for many years, with models being published as recently as 2003. If we look at a summary of all these models and overlay the observed temperature increase on top of them, it tells a very clear message. ExxonMobil knew exactly what their product was doing to the planet and used clever subliminal tactics to deceive the public and the government. The misinformation and propaganda spread about the consequences of their product make them one of the most environmentally destructive companies that has ever existed. So, now that we know this, what's being done about it? In light of this, cities, counties, and states across America have been filing lawsuits against ExxonMobil for deceptive marketing, misleading shareholders, and of course climate damages. Multiple US states are suing Exxon at the state court level, hoping to use the money to build climate-resilient infrastructure. The issue of climate change denial has also been brought before the European Parliament and the Commission of Human Rights of the Philippines, making this an international issue. While all these cases are relatively recent and will most likely take years to conclude, it shows that the public is slowly realizing how they have been lied to for decades. ExxonMobil, along with all other fossil fuel companies that have contributed to climate change denial, must pay for the damages that they have caused the planet. Thanks for sticking around to the end. Leave a comment down below about what you think Exxon deserves. How do you think this lawsuit will affect supply chains and the global economy? As always, the links to all the sources are listed in the description. If you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to support Planet Zero. I'll see you next time.